Today, we have a very interesting guest. We have Gunnar Peterson, who's one of the most well-known people in the fitness world. And Gunnar, I want to do you proper by giving you a bio. So Gunnar Peterson is a renowned personal trainer with decades of experience, known for working with celebrities, athletes, and individuals from all walks of life. With a client list as diverse as his training methods, Gunnar emphasizes strength training modalities that can be transferred from the gym to daily life. He's the former director of strength and endurance for the Los Angeles Lakers. And most recently, he's been involved with a supplement company called MitoQ. Welcome to the show, Gunnar.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
And so you've had such a successful career in fitness and business, which we'll definitely dive into that. But the first place I want to start with is how did your fitness journey even begin?
Training people was an accidental thing. I backed into it. A guy asked me to train when I left the gym one day, early morning, and I kind of sized him up because I thought he wanted to be like a workout partner. And I said, yeah, but I go early. And he said, no problem. And then he said, what do you charge? And I kind of said, oh, we'll figure that out. Because I didn't think that's where he was coming at it from. It didn't cross my mind because I wasn't a trainer, frankly. And then it sort of grew from there. You know, a friend said, you should definitely do that. That's your thing. And so I did it, and then trained a few more people, and I realized that I was doing better than I was doing in my regular 9 to 5. So I quit that and ran with it.
And even going, I guess, a period before that, some of my research notes that I was provided mentioned that you struggled maybe with weight during your upbringing, or there was an incident where your mother enrolled you in Weight Watchers. Like, how did that play into all of this?
I love how you said I struggled with weight instead of saying I was a fat kid. Nobody wants to say that. I was a fat kid. It's what it is. I was not obese, but I was definitely, little man boobs and a belly, and no idea that diet correlated to anything of my physique, and ate what I wanted, and I was a kid. I complained to my mom, it was uncomfortable going to the beach. It was uncomfortable in PE doing shirts and skins. And she said, do you want to do something about it, or do you want to just sit there and complain? Mm-hmm. And, I lied and said, I want to do something about it. She took me to Weight Watchers meetings in Houston, Texas when I was 10 years old. So, and, look, my mom always had best intentions all the time. I don't know now. I would imagine there are some people who would argue with that approach, but look, it helped. It definitely helped in the moment, and it helped for the long term. So, thank God for my mom.
Yeah. And so can you help bridge the gap between, okay, that incident, when you're a kid, did that kind of start to kickstart your study into nutrition, fitness? How did you then,
Yeah, it was more, obviously it was about the food back then. So I made changes in the food, and I saw immediate results, as one does. And then, I went in and out of eating different ways and trying different things. And I was always super active, super athletic as a kid. I went to boarding school after that. My family moved, and I went to boarding school in Switzerland, and we were on all the athletic teams, from cross-country skiing to bowling to soccer and basketball, everything. And, you struggle with your weight when you're a fat kid. Like, at least for me, that's sort of a mindset. And I still see things, I think, through the fat kid lens. But if you're aware of it, that's got to be a big percent of the battle. And in college, I got into working out more in a more structured sense. And then I got into supplements. I couldn't get down to the supplement store, GNC at the time, in the mall. And I went to Duke, so in North Carolina, I couldn't get into that fast enough. And anything I read in a magazine, this supplement helps, this does this, I was stacking up. That didn't stop me from the typical collegiate fare of nachos and beer. And so, yeah, there was a struggle or a juggle or something there, but, and then you get out of that life, and you're able to focus more and be more precise with your supplementation, be more precise with your exercise routine, be more precise with your food intake. Obviously, less time to act the fool when you join the workforce, and things started to come together.
Yeah, and I want to dive into different experiments you've ran on yourself through nutrition, things like that. Because what you described there, I feel like is a very common path, right? Somebody goes into college, they start getting into the gym, they start taking all these different supplements, and then at a later stage, you start to actually get more specific about how you should go about that.
And it's kind of unfair to judge. It's unfair to judge a workout program, a supplement program, a nutrition program when you're having these typical college binge nights. When it's just all hell breaks loose, and to me that's kind of like it washes it all away. You can't say, well, that program didn't work for me. I go, where on the program did it say to drink that much or eat that food or short your sleep? That wasn't in the program. So you're not really. And I still see that to this day with people that embrace a new program and they say, I'm on this program. And then a couple of weeks later, they say, well, the program's really not working. And I go, did you just tell me you took 3 days on the weekend and went completely ham on it? I mean, how is that? So you have to learn, and maybe that comes after college too, at least for some. You have to learn to own it. You have to be responsible and recognize the part you play. And when you get serious about it, at least for me, the more serious I get, the more results I have. So when I back it off, everything else backs up. It's literally like they go hand in glove.
Yeah, and that doesn't just relate to fitness. It relates to anything when you have activities that are like opposing to each other, right? And when you talk about the college thing, I remember, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I got my protein shake. You can kind of check off that box of like, I did something good, but then you go party all night. And then, you got very opposing activities. So,
right. Or you have a workout plan where you're going to work out 3 or 4 times a week and 2 of those get derailed. Let's, just to make it sound better, one gets derailed because you were up all night studying and the other one's derailed because you're up all night partying. But either way, you're at 50% of your workouts at the end of the week. So hard to say, well, that program wasn't beneficial for me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think a lot of the people listening to this maybe have never worked out with a personal trainer and they're trying to understand, okay, what's the difference of working out by myself or watching a program online or finding something to follow versus working out with a trainer? And so what are some of the first things you do when you onboard a client or some of the first things to consider?
I think you're right when you say that. I give you an analogy. I'd say let's say you and I, neither one of us has ever played tennis. And I say, hey, Michael, let's go play some tennis. You go, great idea. I've always loved tennis. I've always loved the idea of tennis. And we get a couple of rackets, a can of balls, and the 2 of us go out on a court. How much fun do you think that's going to be? Because I think it's going to suck. It's going to be awful.
We're going to be lost.
We don't know how to hold the racket. We don't know the rules. We don't know how hard to hit it. We know nothing. So, yeah, sure, we're playing tennis, but we're not really playing tennis. So the people who don't use a train, but the flip side of that, if we went and hired a coach and he gave us a lesson, within the first 10 minutes, he's going to show you the grip. Then he's going to talk about racket back, step through, follow through, hit the ball. And within a few minutes, you're going to be making some solid contact. Do that a few times, you're going to be able to rally. Now, you're not going to Wimbledon, but you can definitely see where it's going to go from an improvement standpoint. Same thing with the gym. People think, I don't need a coach. I know I don't need a trainer. I know what to do. I'll go in there. I'll do this. I'll do that. Then you go in there and it's haphazard and you don't know how to grip the weights. You don't know, where to follow through, racket back. How low do you take the weights? All those things. And you do risk injury, but it's less fun because the results aren't forthcoming. And so you probably are going to abandon that, or you're going to limp through it and put that kind of effort in. And that's what's going to happen. So hire a trainer, in my opinion, if you can, hire a trainer or take a class, a group class, and don't be shy to ask a bunch of questions or do small group exercise. A lot of that is popping up these days. You can hire a trainer and it's like 4, 5, 6 people in a little group. And as a rule, the other people in there are going to be eager to help the new person. That is the gym. A lot of people have a misconception about a gym. They walk in and they think, I'm going to be judged. People are looking at me. Probably not. Probably the people are looking at them. Correct. People are paying attention to themselves. That's the nature of that culture. So, but if you ask for help, as a rule, they are more than happy to give it to you. So I would say do that. I'm not saying you have to only train like that, but just to get your feet wet, just to get where you sort of understand the flow and you learn the ropes, then you can go off on your own. But, tennis, scuba diving, lifting weights, all that stuff without an instructor in the beginning, probably not the best idea.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you point out there is just you got to understand the fundamentals, right? So, two examples was recently, I started playing pickleball with some friends, right? And I hopped out there, no idea, et cetera. And it's like, yeah, it was fun for a few times, but you know, it wasn't, I didn't know anything of why I was doing what I was doing. You're just kind of out there reacting. Then the second thing is I started golfing and I said, all right, I'm not even going to try to hit the range. Let me just sign up for golf lessons. And I've been taking lessons in one of those inside simulators, right? And I was like, oh, wow,
Okay.
there's this thing with the grip, the way, what your posture should look like. You're reviewing tape. And now you can understand, like, okay, how do you make contact, right, with the golf ball? So I think it's so important because there's no ways to intuitively be like, oh, I should do this and that. Right. So it's so helpful to have someone.
Not to mention, if you walk in like that, clean slate, you have no bad habits. So
Yeah.
you can start, you don't have to unwind anything, right? Whereas, let's say you go in for 3 months, let's say you even last that long, and then you don't feel like you're making the gains or you're not improving it the way you wanted to, then you get a trainer. That trainer is probably going to have to unwind some of the stuff that you've started to ingrain. And I would say, spare yourself that. Just get a trainer right out of the gate. Do a group one, small group, a couple times, and then feel it out.
And so, Gunnar, for a lot of people, I think the quote unquote reason as to why they don't have a more structured fitness routine or consistency is a time thing, right? Is there some sort of like 80-20 of like, if you only have 30 minutes a day, or maybe you don't have the equipment or the time to go to the gym, financial resources, whatever reason, is there some sort of simple 80-20 workout that anybody could do to kind of have some basic consistency?
You have to look at this. Everybody's goals are different. So, is the goal weight loss? Is the goal strength gain? Is the goal power? Is it just body composition? But you like the weight where it is? There's so many different ways to approach that. If you're not sure and you're kind of just wading in because you've heard so much about it and you think you should do it, I would do one day with an emphasis on cardio, one day with an emphasis on strength, and I would put a little stretching in. There are inconclusive studies about stretching. Some say it improves, some say it doesn't do anything. I would say if you like how it feels, treat yourself. Give yourself 5, 8, 10 minutes of stretching, and put that in. I would say stretch after you're warm because no reason to risk damage. You don't want to stretch anything cold, and then put some effort into it. Work on whether it's total volume or max effort. Work on improving that next time you go for it. It doesn't have to be every day more and more and more. Like I started at 30 minutes, now I'm at 40 minutes, now I'm at an hour, now I'm at 2 hours. It doesn't have to be that. Some days are just shorter than others. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. And on stretching, Gunnar, so lately I've been seeing a lot of these studios called like Stretch Lab pop up, and
Mm-hmm.
it's assisted stretching. What's your take on assisted stretching versus just stretching yourself? Is there actually some sort of anything to back up that may or may not be better?
So a couple things to that. I've seen them around here. I've seen a stretch lab and a stretch zone. I would say if you don't know what you're doing, why not go in, follow the same theories we did with tennis, lifting weights, scuba diving, and get someone to walk you through it. You might find, oh, I can do a lot of this on my own, but it might feel better to have it be passive on your part and active on someone else's part. I don't know. You would have to do those and feel them, but I definitely wouldn't say, oh, I know how to stretch, I'm going on my own. I would, if you have the means and it's easy access, sure, try it with somebody. And if not, there's a ton of stuff online that you can find for everybody. It's not a bad way to go. It's also not a bad way if you're very deconditioned. You're in your 30s, but you haven't done anything physical since junior high. Maybe stretching is your entry point, right? Maybe that's what you do. You give yourself 10, 12, 15 minutes of stretching a day, top to bottom, hit all the joints, move in all three planes of motion, and watch how you feel better. Just circulation alone, right? It's bringing in oxygen, it's bringing in nutrients, and it's flushing toxins. That's it. That's a very positive change in your life, and it's pretty simple. It can be done at home.
Yeah, I recently started working with assisted stretching, and I feel like it differs a lot from massage, right? Where massage, you feel loose, et cetera. It's a lot more hands on. But with assisted stretching, afterwards, I felt just kind of light and more open. And I'm personally like super bad on just staying consistent on my stretching. So yeah, I think it's very beneficial for people that, just have it done for you. Um,
Yep.
the next topic is around, I guess, for the people that maybe are on the other side, like on the topic of overtraining. Are there certain things to notice or watch out for when you know, like, okay, hey, you're probably on the brink before an injury actually happens?
Yeah, overtraining. That's I don't know. Are we really overtraining? Are people overtraining, or are they under recovering? I think they're very small populations, very, very small populations that overtrain. The body is pretty forgiving, and if you're feeding it right and resting it properly, you can put it through a lot. With that said, I'm not saying nobody's overtrained, sure, but a lot of times the amount of training they're doing just isn't in line with the amount of nutrition or supplementation or water intake. So, your hydration's off, your nutrition's off, your supplements are off, you're not sleeping, you haven't managed your stress levels, and you're looking to push your body for X number of hours every day, something's going to give.
Yeah, that I think that's a great perspective of looking at that, is focusing on the recovery side of it, right? So you mentioned a few of those key items. What are some of the keys, or if you want to list specific actions, maybe you even do or recommend to your clients when it comes to recovery?
I'm a big fan of percussive devices, the handheld, like a Theragun. They're terrific if you have the means. Other than that, stretching. Stretching is a form of recovery. Sleep, easiest one to say is the easiest one. It's not easy for a lot of people. I recognize that a lot of people have trouble falling asleep. There's a big difference between having trouble falling asleep and having trouble going to bed. And it's a lot easier to control the going to bed part. Maybe the falling asleep part eludes you, but there are ways to work on that. There are a lot of people. Is it Dr. James Moss has Power Sleep, and there's another guy who has a terrific book out on sleep, and it gives you some pretty good tools on how when you finally do get in bed to make it happen for you. I'll think of his name in a minute. You are shooting for 8 hours. Some people go, that's impossible. That's impossible. Okay, if it's impossible, shoot for it. See how close you get. I've been working on sleep for probably close to 10 years now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not great at it. I'm not perfect at it. I do stay up later than I should. I do get up earlier than I should, but I'm very aware of it. So I know I'm better than if I were not aware of it. And I think if people, the minute you focus on something a little bit, you right out of the gate, there'll be improvement. It might not be drastic, but it will be something, and all that stuff starts to add up.
Yeah. Some of the things I've worked with for me with sleep is, making sure that I'm setting the air conditioning at 68 degrees. So I'm sleeping in a cold environment. I got the blackout curtains going on. I also notice I get deeper sleep, just stats wise on my Oura ring, if I sleep at the same time, consistently. So you get in some sort of circadian rhythm. That's something that always, like, I didn't realize what a big impact that had, because then weekends, now I'm staying up later and then I try to go back to sleep at, 10 p.m. on the weekdays, but it's about that consistency. I'm wondering, are there any other, kind of activities you do to kind of boost your sleep?
There's something they say, I think it's called 3-2-1. It's no food 3 hours before bed, no water 2 hours before bed, and no electronics 1 hour before bed. I could be butchering that, but not a bad way to go if you think about how to taper your routine all the way into the bed. And I know I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I feel like I haven't had enough water, or haven't had enough calories. I will think I should do this before I go to bed, and I'll
Yeah.
load up, and it's like that's just not smart. The devices, I plead the fifth on that. I'm on it until the second I close my eyes, and it's whether it's setting alarms, sending a text that says, "Sorry, I should have texted you back. Got ahead of me. I'll hit you tomorrow." The Instagram scroll, like a lot of people are probably, and I'll own it. I'll load it for everyone. A lot of people do that, and
Yeah.
and we might be better off without it. And I think you'll notice it in a short period of time. I know when I'm off it, and I put it down, there's a settling feeling that is way more conducive to sleep.
Yep. And I think something to highlight there is, like, you just got to experiment and figure out what works for you. Like for me, I notice if I eat right before I sleep, like, destroys my sleep. Heart rate is up, everything. And I have friends that they love eating right before they sleep because it's a comfort thing for them and they sleep great with it. So I think the key for our listeners is just experiment and figure out what might work for you.
Right. And you think about, like, when you wake, on all these things, we should have started with this. If you have a system, and it doesn't have to be in stone, but if you have like a framework, it's way easier to stay in bounds, right? If you know, I'm doing this when I wake up, I'll do this by this time, this by this time. And it doesn't mean you're some anal retentive, regimented freak. It means
Mm-hmm.
you have structure to your life.
Yep.
And that does separate us from a lot of the animals, right? This is how it works. This is how we progress as a species. Just find a structure. It doesn't mean you're beholden to anything, or you're locked in. It means it's a way of using the time that you're allotted more efficiently. Don't you want to get more? I don't know about you, but every day all I think is, how can I wring every drop out of every day?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make sure I'm experiencing everything, seeing everything, hearing everything, tasting everything, listening to everything, speaking to everybody I need to, experiencing all these things. And for me, the way to do it is to stay in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in the game more, I'm more likely to have one of the big plays. That's how I look at it, right? If I'm on the bench, or if I'm sidelined for any reason,
Yeah.
way harder to have an impact.
Totally. Yeah. And I think I want to highlight what you said there. It's important to have a structure, but it doesn't have to be rigid. Right. So for me, like, I know I start off my day with exercising. If I wait till the afternoon, usually it doesn't get done. So I like to do that in the morning. Then the first work block of my day before lunch is all my focus stuff. I'm not taking calls. I'm not taking meetings. It's what do I need to just sit down and do? Then I got lunch. And then I have a second work block session. Then the afternoons is when I'll do calls, right? So I know generally that's my structure. And then I allow myself to kind of just wake up naturally without an alarm in the morning, right? So that's one of the things I've noticed for me is I'm not the type of person that likes to be like, oh, 6 a.m., there's my alarm, 5 a.m., whatever the case is. Because for me, that kind of started creating a psychological pressure. When I was sleeping, I was like, oh my God, now I got 8 hours left, 7 hours. And I was like, okay, if I can just get to my bed at a certain time, I know I'm naturally going to wake up around this range, and that's okay. And so I think that's important to highlight, because I think when you go down a rigid path, that is when you can be taken out the game, because now you start to hate how your day went, and now you're tired and you get on this, vicious cycle, right? And so I think that's important to note, is the structure is the most important thing.
It is. I'm maybe I put myself under the stress. I have that morning alarm. I will say I beat my alarm probably 6 days out of 7,
Wow.
and yeah, and I know that's conditioning and just how it is for me. But look, I haven't delved into the studies, but maybe there's something that'll say, by doing that, the last 30 minutes of my sleep are not beneficial to me because my body is already revving up and already on alert. Maybe, I don't know, but I like being up at a certain time. I feel like I'm more accomplished. I feel like I get more done, and for me, if that's soothing and that makes me feel like I'm in a rhythm, then I'll take that. And I don't think anybody else needs to weigh in on it. I'm not doing anybody any harm by getting up early. I'm quiet. I'm a ninja. I'm a ninja in the morning.
That reminds me, I think there's this assessment people could take called chronotypes, right? And that's where everybody, I think it's like the wolf, dolphin, bear, and something else, but it shows how people have a lot of different chronotypes, right? So then that explains why some people are great at waking up at 4:30. Some people like to, wake up at 9, and maybe they stay up later, et cetera, right? So
Correct.
I think it just all goes back to experimenting and knowing what works for you.
I've had a million people tell me, it's so crazy you get up that early. And I go, it's not crazy if you go to bed early.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy to wake up at 4 if you're going to bed at midnight.
Yeah.
But if you're going to bed at 9, 8:39, it's not that crazy. Like it all works, we all have the same 24 hours. You're just spending it this way. There's nothing heroic about getting up early. There's something insane about it if you're up late as well, right? So you just have to look at it and go, can I pare it back in the evening in time to make the morning doable?
Totally. And so in your book, I saw a mention of the 4 F words: function, foundation, freedom, and focus. And so do you want to kind of explain what do those words mean to you?
From an exercise standpoint, function, right? Are the moves serving you in real life? Are they just movements for movements, or do they actually translate to what you're doing in real life? freedom. By training a certain way, you have the freedom to move in different ways, whether that's, push your kid on the swing set or run to get a tennis ball, like if you and I were out there in the afternoon kind of thing. The freedom to move your body in all three planes of motions, high, low, the way the body's designed to move. The focus is, are you focused when you're doing the training, or are you sort of drifting through the workout with no plan in the workout and no definitive ending time?
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss one? What did I get?
Foundation.
Function, focus, freedom, and foundation. Right. The foundation is, have you built a proper foundation in your training such that you can build on it, whether that's adding weights, adding overall volume, or progressing the movement to something more difficult, more challenging, that would then come back and help you in the function department when you have to function in real life. The function is the part for most people. I think they understand it conceptually, but I don't think necessarily that it's practiced all the time in the gym. Rotating movements. If you think about rotation, whether it's just reaching back, grabbing your seatbelt, whether it's reaching in, putting your kid in the car, putting your groceries in the car, your bag in the overhead bin, a kid out of the crib, loading something heavy into the fridge or a container or on a shelf, all that rotational movement that we put our bodies through. If you're not adding that component into your training, at some point, you're probably more susceptible to an injury, especially if you're moving heavy things.
Very helpful. Recently, I've been hearing more talk about heart rate training zones, specifically when it relates to cardio, right? A lot of talk about, okay, train a lot of time in zone 2 training. If somebody's trying to expand, their cardio, or let's say they're runners, things like that, what are your thoughts around zone 2 training? How should someone go about that or think about that?
Well, first of all, by the end of this podcast, you're going to have people spending $4,000 on everything between heart rate monitors, Theraguns, Mito Qs, new tennis rackets, trainers.
Yeah.
So I would say you have to become comfortable. You have to start to learn your own body, right? It is your body. It is your responsibility. And you learn RPE, right? Rate of perceived exertion. Where are you on a 1 through 10? 10 being you're out of breath, you can barely move, you can't keep up, it's almost over, you're passing out. 1 being what we're doing right now. So where are you on your RPE scale? If you're in that 5.5, 6.5 zone, you're probably in that mid zone, right? You're probably at 65 to 85%. Body is using fat as the primary fuel source. Once it's burned through the glycogen, once the sugar stores are burned, it will turn to fat. If you're in that zone, it will turn to fat as a fuel source, not convert to fat. So you want to stay in that zone if burning body fat is what you're looking to do. If you're looking to improve your VO2 max, like your cardio output, how fast you can go, how hard you can go, then you're going to want to push that in the training. And then there are different ways of approaching that. Are you going to do that with intervals? Are you going to, and then what's the work rest ratio going to be, right? Is it going to be 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4? Are you going to run 10 seconds, walk 20, or run 10, walk 30, or walk 40? All those are going to be goal dependent for you. But I would say it's actually not a bad way to go once you have a good foundation to play with that and see, because we kind of don't always keep track of where our bodies are. And you blink and you've gone from 25 to 35, and you blink again and you've gone from 35 to 45. I was just hitting tennis balls with my 7-year-old son yesterday, and I felt some of the movement when I ran. I was like clunky, and I haven't been running much in the last year. I've been doing more closed kinetic chain stuff, bikes and ellipticals, and this. I've done hill stuff, but not like pushing. And I thought, wow, you lose your mechanics, right? It's a skill. Running is a skill. Everybody thinks, well, I'm a biped, I know how to run. Like in theory how to run, but have you put it into practice? If you haven't in a while, chances are you're rusty. If you see somebody who hasn't run in a while, when they do run, it's your gait is awkward. So when you put that stuff into play more often, right, you're using it, so less likely to lose it. I would recommend that once again you have that foundation.
Yeah, I think what you touched on there that was important is, don't try to get too hard into just like the stats of specific heart rates, et cetera. It's about your perceived exertion as well. You really got to kind of understand yourself.
With that, I would add one codicil. You
Yeah,
can probably go a little farther and a little harder than you think, especially in the
agreed.
beginning. When you think you're at a 10, you're probably at a 7. As you progress, when you think you're at a 10, you might be at an 8.5. But right out of the gate, your 5, 6, 7 may feel like 8, 9, 10. And you have to recognize your body can handle a lot. It can handle a lot and come back for more.
Right. Are there any common myths or fitness myths or beliefs that, you found to just not be true?
Wow, there's so many, and they get dispelled daily. Um, Gosh, if you follow a couple guys on Instagram, Lane Norton or Max Lugavere, both guys I know, Bio Lane and Max Lugavere, more nutrition, but these guys, and it's just they just break it all down by science. So I think Lane has a shirt that says data is greater than your feelings, right? It's like I know you feel that, I know
Yeah.
you think that, but the data says no. So sorry. And he's pretty unapologetic about it, and I love his approach. And he's just a solid guy. It's a great platform. So things are broken down every day. Whether it's high reps, lightweight for definition, and heavy reps, heavy weight, and low reps for size. There's so many studies that show that you can build size with a variety of rep schemes. That definition is really body composition. So you want to make sure you're considering calories in, calories out. So many of that's, they call it bro science. A lot of the stuff that came out in the 70s and 80s, some of it holds true for sure, and it's been proven out. But some of it is like, no, that was that group of guys in the gym who did it, and that's not really a study. So, if you're going to take the deeper dive yourself and start reading the studies, make sure you read them start to finish, not just the summaries, and listen to some of the people who have read them, and you'll save yourself some time, and you'll realize that maybe there are no shortcuts, but there are definitely some more direct, paths to that success than not.
What's your take, if you have opinion at all, about this whole movement towards, carnivore diets where it's mainly fruit, meat, honey, organ meats, things like that? What's your take on that?
I would say if you want to try that, try that. But I think you look at what was the movie Game Changers? As so many people switched
Oh
over to
yeah,
vegan, and
that
then
was
that was
wild.
blown out of the water. Right, and then that was blown out. I mean, I had people who I know and respect, and who are educated and intelligent, and there's a difference. And yeah, I'm a vegan. I'm
Very
starting. I'm a
important
vegan
point right there.
tomorrow.
Educated and intelligence
Very
are
fun.
different.
Correct. And they're like, I'm gonna be a vegan tomorrow. And I said, really? That's pretty and there were powers behind that project. So whatever. Look, you got to do what feels right. And my dad's 85 years old, and his diet is just not pretty. But in my brother and I, we want to. Hey, Dad, I brought you some of this, or hey, Dad, I got some of this, and Dad, you ought to try a little bit of this. At the end of the day, I say to my brother, look, we have to realize he's lived longer than both of us. So he clearly, we have the theory, but he has the practical. He can
Right.
say, I've already done this, guys. I've already been there. But, there are ways to say, okay, but he's also active, and he moves around, and he's 100% with the brain and everything. So hard to say, Dad, don't do this. But from everything we know, what he's eating, there are so many better ways he could do it. But who are we to say that when he's happy and
Yeah.
he's functioning? At the end of the day, if he's happy and not hurting anyone, can you argue that he's winning? Can you argue that what he's doing is bad? I mean, that's a tough call. So I would say to people, find your path. If you know that everything you're eating is ultra processed and it just marinating in preservatives, that's probably not going to end up well for you. Or
Right.
if you know that you are grossly overweight, right? If you have a little bit of fat, that's one thing. But if you're grossly overweight and look, I don't have to put you on a scale. I don't have to have a guy in a lab coat tell you. When you know, you know. So if you're in that shape and you want to have the argument, that's probably not the best position. But if the rest is all going pretty smooth and whatever, I don't know. I'm more of a let people live. If you're
Totally.
trying to make if you're trying to make good choices and you eat a little bit of this or a little too much of that, and you're not hurting anybody and you feel good and you're happy,
Yeah.
yeah, you're good with me. I get people, we go out and I don't want to eat this in front of you. I said, why? Well, I know you're a trick. Do you honestly think I judge what anyone eats? I care about what my kids eat. I care about what my kids eat. That's it. I don't even worry about my wife. My wife eats off the kids menu most of the time, but she looks phenomenal. And it's one of those things. I'll go, babe, seriously? And she'll say, are you complaining? I go, no, no complaints here, because she looks beautiful. So if she's happy and she's healthy, what are we gonna like? Is that the fight I'm gonna fight? No.
Yeah, I think it's important to not lose sight of what is the outcome, right? Feeling good, happiness, joy. Like, what are you actually optimizing for, right? Versus letting the tactics start to guide all of that. I think about my grandma who, a week before she died, and she was about 91. We're at a buffet in Vegas, and she's eating French fries and salmon and fried chicken, and she was loving it, And I was like, yeah, like, who am I to judge? It's not me to be like, hey, grandma, have this green shake. Like, let her do her.
And what is average lifespan for a woman worldwide? It's like 77,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It's something like that. So at the end of the day, she's crushing the game, right? By 20%. She's 14 years up on the game. What are you going to teach her?
Yeah,
You tell her
exactly.
now this is the time, grandma, to put it all down and have some oat bran. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Got to be practical with it. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is because you've worked with probably a ton of celebrities, athletes, arguably just high performers, right? And a question I have is, what have you noticed from a mindset standpoint that separates, the people that are excellent with the people that are truly elite? Is there anything from a mindset standpoint that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's the can-do mindset. It's not about how something's not going to work out. It's not about how I can't do that. It's I can do that, and they find a way to do it. And that goes for juggling projects to fitting things into their daily lives. That goes for everything between how can I fit in this project? Let's say there are two projects coming their way. It's not, well, I can't do this because I got to do that. It's how can we make that work? We can find a way to make that work. And that's the same with their day-to-day lives of, I want to work out. I have to go to this meeting. I have these two phone calls to make. It's not, yeah, well, I have the meeting and the phone calls. So I can't make my workout or cancel one of the meetings. They find a way to thread that needle on a regular basis and get stuff done. And I see them. I have seen them for years attack it, and they're calm with it, and everything just falls into place because they keep that mindset. And I know so many people, well, I can't work out Wednesday. I have a whatever. And you go, okay, no problem. Like, that's your whole day. You
Yeah.
realize there are all these other hours of the day. You can't, or you can't get to me,
Or it's not
or you
important.
can't
It's
do
not a
anything,
priority.
which is fine if it's not. But if you take that, yeah, working out, I'm not worried about working out tomorrow. I'm going to get it in on Friday versus I can't. Then you're always that victim. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
mentality that I don't see with the hyper achievers.
Yeah, it's start coming from a place of, it's out of my control, right? Oh, I have all these other things, and that's the reason, right? Versus owning up to it and, taking responsibility for that. I love the saying, I can't remember where I heard it from, where it's replace the phrase, I don't have time to, with it wasn't a priority, right? And that totally shifts because that's really oftentimes the truth of what had happened there. But I got to imagine at that level, Gunnar, most people probably have that can do attitude, right? So I'm starting to think about like what really separates that top 1%, right? Like, I don't know, for if we think about the NBA, everybody in the NBA is freaking good, right? But what really makes someone that special person?
I don't even know how well you play, but I can tell you they could all beat you.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to hear people from the stand. This was so funny. I remember taking my kids my older kids, Henry and Jack and Sloan, to a game, and there were people in the stands yelling, you suck" at a player. And my oldest son said to me, "Daddy, does he suck?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? He's better than anyone in the building. Anyone." Like,
Yeah.
it's so funny to say that, and like, they're
Yeah. It's
so
not even
good. They're
close.
so correct.
Yeah. But what separates like everybody in the league from those people that are the 1% in the league? Have you noticed anything with working with people like that?
Work ethic. I mean, you
Yeah.
see these guys, and those guys, they're the ones who they're first in the building. They're taking extra shots or extra laps after the game. They're in the weight room early. They get it done. When they go on the road, they shut it down early enough to get their sleep. In the off season, they take adequate, rest, recovery, vacation time, family time, but then they never let the game go. Right? They come right back in and get in the system and start their workouts, and they're doing things to improve every year. I know
Mm.
one player years ago, and I told him how it was so great to watch him from a rookie. And I think he was in like his fifth season or sixth season. And he said to me, and I said, just your game has expanded. So he was a dominant player in the paint. And he said, "You notice that?" I go, "Yeah." I mean, I go to all their games and all this. And he said, um, every off season, he had started working 1 foot farther away from the basket because he
Hmm.
knew that as his career progressed, he was going to be able to be more effective from the outside versus having to take all the physicality underneath the rim. And I thought, I love that a guy who, I mean, he had to be 24, 25 when he was telling me this, already had a plan. It was already in effect. There was a strategy, there was a system, flawed or not, or nobody does that or whatever, but he had one. And I thought, that's a guy who's destined for success.
Yeah. That's incredible foresight
Yeah,
for that person to have.
great.
Yeah.
And to be able to put it together at 24. I was looking for my keys, like, and this guy
Yeah.
had it all mapped out of how he was. It was great. It was great to hear. And I think that's what separates those 1%ers.
Yeah. And when you talk about work ethic, I want to highlight, I think all high achievers, they have great work ethic, but it's that extra mile, right? There's that saying where there's no traffic in that last, extra mile or something along those lines. And it's really that's the difference maker. I feel like I've heard time and time again.
Go the extra mile. It's never crowded.
Yeah. It reminds me of
Yeah.
one time when I was in Sorrento in Italy with my wife, and they're always talking about the Sorrento sunset. You got to go see it. So my wife and I go to this place that's a viewpoint, and then we're like, oh my God, it's so crowded. We're not going to be able to see a sunset. Then we see the staircase going up, right? And it's probably, I don't know, 3 floors worth of staircases. So we're like, all right, let's go up there. Sure enough, we walk up there. There's nobody there, and we have an incredible view of the same sunset by ourselves. And it just got me
Wow.
realizing, I was like, all it was going up a freaking staircase, right? And that's the
Yeah.
thing. People don't take that extra step to get that greater
Totally.
reward. And so that just reminded me of that.
And that extra step that comes in so many, right? I mean, that's almost metaphorical, right? The extra step for you guys was the staircase, but for other people, it's the training off season. It's the recovery. Are you getting massage? Are you doing body work? Are you hydrating? Are you looking at your electrolyte balance? Are you, a lot of guys do PRP stuff for their knees in the NBA. Are you doing that early enough in the off season to be able to start the season fresh? Are you supplementing, right? Do you take protein shakes? Are you worried about your antioxidants? Are you taking MitoQ, where you're going to hit, all the way down to the foundation of the cell in the mitochondria, so your foundation is laid? Are you taking a vitamin C or a B complex to just make sure your stress levels are managed? Is your diet on point? Did you actually bother with that money that you got from the league? Did you talk to a nutritionist, or are you still just having, peanut butter sandwiches? And a lot of guys, you go, they just don't want to invest because the way they look at it is they've been doing this and it's worked for them. So why tinker with it? Which is fine, except that we're organic. So
Mm-hmm.
we are constantly changing. Our bodies are shifting and aging and dealing with stressors. So you have to play defense, literally and figuratively, if you want to stay in a sport, if you want to stay in a game. So, what are you doing for inflammation? Or are you doing, there's so many things out there to not try new things and scratch the surface. You are effectively allowing your career to be short. And whether that's your sports career or your life career, because so many people, oh, he lived to 80, right? But the last 14 years, he couldn't leave his house, right? I'm not going to judge and say that's a life, not well lived, but I would say there's a way to have done that better.
Absolutely. Um, as part of our research too, I came across, I think there was a notion that you have a very competitive nature to yourself. And I'm curious about competitiveness. How does somebody fire that up within themselves?
It's funny. My brother and my mom, hyper
Mhm.
competitive in everything they do, and both very good at everything they do. Uh, Very, very good. So it's easy, right? It's easy to be competitive when I'm crushing. But they also both worked at it and earned it. They're no naturals if you read like the talent code. But for me, it's a more of a competitive within myself. And then you hear that say, well, show me a good loser and I'll show you a real loser. It's not that I'm a good loser. It's that I'm a good sport about losing when I lose. Don't worry, I'm beating myself up on the inside. I don't have to. I don't have to, throw my racket down and have a tantrum. I'm playing against me all the time, and
Mhm.
the longer you live, the more you realize that really is the only person you're playing against, because the rest of it kind of doesn't matter. So for me, it's always whether it's what you're doing in the gym, whether it's how patient you can be with your kids, um, how consistent you can be with your spouse, how how efficient you are at work. Those are all wins to me. I'm competitive with that kind of thing. I'm not competitive with, you know, did I bench press more than the next guy, or that's just not, that's so irrelevant. I actually told my son, that's funny, we just came up. I brought my son home today from a haircut, and he's going to karate and he didn't want to go. And he goes, it's not fair. None of the other kids that were at the play date have to go. And I said to him, we don't do anything because the other kids do or don't have to do it. We do what we do. I said, we do what we do in our family. We eat the way we eat. We study the way we study. We do sports the way we do sports. We go to bed when we go to bed. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. It's not better. It's just our family. And I think that is how we'll compete. Can I get enough sleep compared to how much sleep I got yesterday, not compared to how much sleep my coworker got. Has
Yeah,
nothing to do
it's
with
not
me.
relevant.
Correct.
And so, actually, touching on kind of a mix of competitiveness and also mindset is what does that self talk look like when things don't go your way? Or, and this could be things you notice in yourself, maybe you notice with people you've worked with. When something doesn't go someone's way, what have you noticed like the champions or the elite people do differently with that self talk?
Well, there's a lot of information out there about negative self-talk, and I know that works for a lot of people, and I know there are a lot of very accomplished people, highly achieved athletes who have a lot of negative self-talk. They beat themselves up about stuff. That doesn't work for me. So I go the other way. I am just incessantly encouraging myself. You give yourself credit for what you do. You don't beat yourself up for what you didn't do, right? We get what we get. We don't get upset, but you think of how we can do better. And
Hmm.
so mine is more like, come on, we got this. Let's go. Let's go. We got this. We're up. We got this. It's that kind of talk. And it's usually little sound bites. It's usually that. Some of the people I've worked with, there's some interesting little mantras. You hear some of them whisper, some of them shout, some of them turn, some of them clap. Lots of different little rituals, and they're fun to see. It's great to see Jack. If you remember Jack Lemmon, I think two-time Academy Award-winning actor. Uh, Jack Lemmon had a thing where right before they yelled action, he would say "magic time," and it was his way of gearing up, and just as a performer, as just a way to, I'm on, and to see that, and to see like, that's cool. That's his little thing. You watch people, you watch some of the tennis players with idiosyncrasies and ticks or habits or rituals, whatever they are, and those things start to build. And you watch kids watch those people, and then they start to build that into their own little repertoire of movements or self-talk, and you can see how that becomes a thing. You could actually probably do a great documentary on habits, rituals, tics of great athletes. I think that would be fun to watch, and then to dive into it, whether you interview them or you interview a psychologist. Why does this happen? Why do they do this? Why does this work? Why doesn't this work? That could be a great study.
That's a fantastic idea. Oh my goodness. I'd love to watch that as well, or even possibly put that together. That's very interesting because it reminds me of, I saw some clip where, Kobe Bryant listening to the Halloween theme music, right, in the locker room to pump him up. And that inspired me to actually, I have a few songs now before I start podcasting that I just have on replay to kind of be like, all right, it's time to podcast. And I think when we talk about negative self-talk, positive self-talk, I think it's a spectrum of just different tools in your tool belt, right? I think there are times where the negative self-talk, for me personally, it gets me fired up and going. And other times it's a path of acceptance, right? Okay, great. That didn't go the way we wanted. All right, here are, different ways that we'll go about this. A show that I've just found so interesting lately is a show called Alone. And it's like a survival show where there's 10 contestants and they live in the wilderness until there's one person left, right? And so these people are totally isolated, and the self-talk that goes in there is so interesting because some people get very negative on themselves and others are like, okay, well, it's from a place of acceptance. And so I think that's one of the most interesting shows of just like human psychology and how people deal with, just themselves and the human need to survive.
Do they have to create their own shelter and food and all that?
Everything. Yeah. So they're hunting, rabbits, squirrels, birds, fishing. They're only allowed to basically bring a backpack of clothes and then 10 items of their choice. And then all of them have a bow and arrow. And so, yeah, they have to do everything. And, they're in these very remote areas where the one I'm watching right now, it gets totally snowed out now. So now the temperature every day is like in the 20s, everything's starting to freeze over. All the game they've been hunting and fishing is disappearing, and they got to continue they're like on day like 50 something at this point.
Wow.
So yeah. It's pretty crazy. I think some of the seasons people have gone over 100 days, but I think it's just an interesting look at human psychology and self-talk.
Sure.
So the last thing I want to touch on is about MitoQ. So I've seen the supplement around and I was looking on the website. So it seems like there's is it a form of CoQ10 or like a variation of it, or what's the relationship there?
Yeah, it's an antioxidant, CoQ10. The thing is, MitoQ has so much research behind it, and there are so many antioxidants that get into the body and do the work that they can. But MitoQ is able to penetrate the cell wall and get into the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. So we go back to foundation. It is truly foundational. So your cells are invigorated. Your cells are recharged, and there's no supplement that does this. So you look at all the people who take CoQ10, you go, okay, but your CoQ10 doesn't do this, and this has research behind it that shows the benefits are augmented. Why wouldn't you take? It's like buy this one or buy the one that does more for the same price kind of thing. And I look at it and I think, I'm so glad I found it. I'm so glad I use it. It's look, I think there's a reason that I push the way I push and I don't get sick and I answer the bell as often as I do. And I have people go, you're a machine, dude. I'm not a machine. I'm committed. I'm dedicated. I'm driven, but I'm also fortified with things like MitoQ, a good diet, proper rest, a peaceful home environment. I have my structure for my day, so I'm setting myself up to execute at a higher level than I would if I didn't take the time to lay it all out and have a system. I don't think I could answer the bell every day. I think there would definitely be times where I just said, today I'm going to take off. And I have off days. But I schedule them, right? I don't, Sunday, it's going to be loose. I'd like to do this, and this, but I'm not on the clock. It doesn't happen to that. But the MitoQ has definitely helped me and been hugely, it's been a big factor in being able to push, especially as you get older. Like, I joke like age is a number. Age is a number. And if you're doing the right things, there are a lot of things you're looking at, and I see people that are not as old as I am, and they're just not getting cut. I had a guy the other day who was telling me about his, trials and tribulations, and he does everything right. But Gunnar, you get old, you get this. And I looked at him and I go, I'm 8 years older than you are. And the guy,
Yeah.
the guy he was floored. He was floored. And I wasn't trying to make that sting, but at the same time, if you're going to use age as the out, I'm going to have to call you on that.
Yeah, totally. Well, Gunnar, thank you so much. I thought we had such a wonderful conversation talking about all sorts of different topics. Really appreciate that. If our audience wants to find out more about you, where should they find you?
On Instagram, I'm at Gunnar Fitness, and website GunnarPeterson.com. But I will tell you, whatever your pregame ritual, your pump up songs are, your tunnel songs as they call it in the league, whatever your tunnel songs are working, because you certainly made this easy, and thank you for that, because sometimes they get off to a funky start, but it was very easy speaking with you, so I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you, Gunnar. Appreciate that.